kind of been feeling lately like, and this is based off of reoccurring trends in my life. I kind of feel like people don't really like me, and I don't refer to this YouTube channel. And I suppose it's fairly well received overall, but I just feel like talking to people, apart from these intellectual chats we can have and whatever, and those go perfectly fine. I feel like as soon as I try to be more candid, be more human, just apart from the normal talks we have or whatever, like people don't really, I guess, validate or care about or think that like who I am other than as a thinker or whatever is like even, I don't know, good. I can't really verbally extrapolate that idea. And this isn't to say like I haven't had any successful relationships with people as friends or whatever. Just like I feel like anytime I really try to be who I am at a level that's maybe a little bit more than what's expected, I guess, because we have a lot of very ingrained expectations of how deep can relationships go, and what things are appropriate at what time, etc., etc. I guess I feel like I'm noticing some kind of a larger trend where anytime I really try to be as like forward, as candid, as open with a person as possible, I just get shut down. I don't know if this is really a me problem or a society problem or what, but I guess I feel like there's a lot of people who say like, just be yourself all the time, and your relationships should be to like better express yourself with other people and all that. But I feel like there is very much something in people's minds that wants to like repress who you are. Like they want to put you into a kind of like a box and just say, exist within that box, and if you can do that and you don't try to expand yourself outside of that, then we can be friends, then we can have conversations, blah blah blah. And this isn't even really something that's like dramatic. It's not something that manifests in ways that are like more problematic than people would really understand if they were like directly trying to empathize with me, like in the situation from my exact perspective. Like it's not like I have these problematic fights with people, or it's not like I routinely like get particularly angry at anyone, or it's nothing dramatic. It's always like very small things, like people, as soon as you say a certain thing, they'll kind of give you the cold shoulder, or if you try to get into certain topics with someone, they'll try to avoid that through very kind of manipulative means, and they don't really want to talk about things other than, as I said, the box they put you in. Like they say, this is you, you're gonna stay that way, and beyond that, it's a dead space. And if you try to venture into it, I kind of feel like people almost intentionally, I don't know if they do it consciously, but intentionally, they want to control you, and they want to limit you, I guess, I feel. And this, I know this is like sounding like some schizo bullshit, like you're just being paranoid, but this has just been the way my life has been. I get very passionate, I guess, like at a more emotional level when and I feel like there's a reciprocity between me and someone else, and I feel like I want to expand upon that and make more out of it, and really understand the entirety of this person. But it's almost like they don't really want to be understood sometimes. I'm not saying this applies to everyone. I'm not saying this applies to every relationship I've been in, but it's like people have limits. They have barriers, and whether they're aware of them or not, they exist. And I don't want to say this is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, people should have boundaries. People should have points where they reach in a relationship where they feel like, this is it. Let's cap it off there. But it's deceptive a lot of the time, I feel. Especially when this is a person who, on the surface, you get along with very well. But trying to push to certain subjects, maybe they're just constantly saying, I don't want to talk about this thing. No, not even with words, just with the way that they choose to either engage with one thing or another thing. So you kind of have to recognize these things and, work around that, and then, try not to bring that thing up, even if it's, in the framing of your relationship, it could form a good conversation. Also, people can be kind of opportunistic about how they will actually choose to engage with certain subjects. Like, if they feel like they're in a position where they could actually do better than you in the conversation, then they might be more likely to take it up than they would be if they felt like, maybe you're more educated, or maybe you could have some kind of a debate that really unfurled the depths of their opinions and, exactly where they go wrong in their thinking and so on. And, I guess this is somewhat natural because, when you talk politics or whatever with someone, a lot of them don't want to, expand their thoughts. They actually want to just feel like they, won the argument or whatever. They don't actually have an open mind where they're considering what your opinion is and then, integrating that into their own thought process. No, they just they view it as a conflict that they have to win. But it's crazy to me to think that even something like politics is like a conflict we're trying to win. If I'm debating politics with someone, the reason we're having this conversation in theory is because we want to imagine there's a best system somewhere in our minds, and we should build society towards that, right? And this is supposed to be like a very mutual thing, that occurs throughout society. It's not like if there was like a horrible policy that one party could pass that, that party benefits in some abstract way from passing it. Like, maybe in the sense that they'll get more voters, or, they'll be paid more for participating in their governmental role or whatever. But obviously those things are social constructs, I guess. It's not like you can ever pass a policy that is objectively bad and make the world overall a better place. You can't do that. Obviously people aren't perfect. Obviously most of the decisions we make aren't going to be perfect. I feel like in some ways I can actually be maybe too discerning for my own good. Like, I might analyze people to a level where I shouldn't, maybe. And even if I could supposedly deconstruct a person to such a level that I just understood, like, every desire, every belief, every system through which they create their persona, their presented self in the world, maybe it's best to keep things somewhat surface level with people, I guess. And this is a bit of a concession from me, because I've always had this idea in my mind that you should strive for depth in relationships. You should strive to get to know people as much as you possibly can. You shouldn't be afraid of showing who you are. You shouldn't be afraid of judgment, or, you should never hold back what you're saying or thinking. But maybe a lot of human relationships are really just about that. They're about keeping things at a certain, let's say, Overton window of where we draw the line versus, where it's not, even interesting or whatever. I guess some people have, different levels here than others. Some people think you can express yourself at a a level that's beyond what most people would normally be okay with, but there's definitely some kind of limitation here. There's some kind of placed hurdle where if you're engaging with someone, if you're trying to be as meaningful as possible, maybe they almost feel like, and this could be some subconscious programming in them, that they're not worth being understood fully, or maybe it's not even that they don't want to have like these deep conversations and deep relationships. Maybe it's that they don't really know how to be reciprocative of that. Maybe they just are kind of used to the way that we have this very surface level interaction world, and going beyond that to them just seems unprecedented, I guess would be the right word. It seems like something that you shouldn't do at some level. It's almost like some kind of a taboo, like some kind of a collective repressed tendency where someone can say all these things and be nice to you, and someone can try to express themselves as much as possible, but in the seat of their consciousness, where they're not really aware, they want to have some level of repression. They want to be limited. It's a sobering thought for me, and I suppose this sounds fairly abstract, just coming from someone who you barely know, at a personal level, but to me it's very concrete. To me it's something that it seems to be related to this traditionalist kind of programming that we all have at some level. I'm sure I even have it at some level, where you want to keep things ordained with certain rules, certain narratives. You want to keep the surface world kind of projects onto us as well as we project onto it. It kind of gives us guidelines on how we structure our relationships, and the level at which we think and process information is also kind of dictated by some kind of repression, where you could talk about like psychedelics, for instance. Like if you take psychedelics, you'll probably, unless you're very, very heavily invested in what surface reality is, you'll probably get a sense that people have a lot of fear in just normal interactions. And again, this is not to say that they're doing anything wrong. It's more like we do have some level of collective repression, and making sense of that and trying to make light of it can be to some people, it can be very frightening. It can be like, why aren't you just letting me exist in this very normal and temporary way? And why do you actually, apart from the box of conversations I've put you in, why do you even, what's your agenda? Like people always think that you have some kind of agenda you're pushing, some kind of, like you have some kind of an ends in your mind. Even when you don't, even when it's just conversation for no reason. Like they'll think you're doing it because you want something from them. And that's, I gotta admit, most people kind of want things from you when they talk to you. They want, maybe they want to influence your thoughts in a way that's not totally healthy. Maybe they, maybe they have some kind of attraction to you. Maybe they want money from you. I don't know. It's just basic stupid stuff like that. But apart from those things, I guess some people, and this would be kind of like the cause of some of the repression, is some people kind of crave this egoic domination in relationships. I mean, you think about like how do most relationships really start? Like most romantic relationships. It's not like you just go up to people, tell them your interests, blah blah blah. There's like this whole narrative that has to construct itself around the exact way that you're interacting when you first meet, and you have to kind of abide by certain expectations and rules we set for each other. And through this process, which involves a lot of lying, to put it bluntly, you then eventually decide, you're okay with each other enough to have a romantic relationship. But that's, I guess to me, it's indicative of something deeper in the way that relationships do tend to function, the way that we don't always even understand our own goals. Sometimes the things that we want, we don't really even necessarily know that we want them. And sometimes we do things in ways that are self-destructive without even knowing it. And it's, I guess overall, it's kind of disheartening to me to think that there's so much deception that goes on both between people who are exploitative and people who are just trying to protect themselves. You kind of have to lie to people at some level because you have this expectation that they'll be exploitative of you. So that's just, self-defense in that way. It's defense against the dark arts, I guess you could call it. But a lot of people, they then become, and this is like my favorite word, is pathological. And that basically just means they're doing it not because it necessarily aligns with facts or what they can ascertain as truth. It's more because they're doing it just because that's what they're used to. It's the way that they have trained themselves to think and to approach situations. I guess I feel like I'm kind of hitting on something deeper in the human psyche about fear, about, I guess you could say, bullying as well. Like why does someone bully at all in the first place? Because they want to create a better self-image at the expense of someone else. And bullying can be on multiple levels. Bullying can be, someone who, just as a schoolyard bully will try to humiliate you or whatever, but it could also just be like subtly eroding someone's self-confidence. Could be a lot of things, honestly. And I guess the thing to remember is, humans, all of us, we're not perfect. We've all got a lot of flaws. We've all got trauma in some way. I think everyone does at some level have a level of trauma. Overcoming that and learning to be both discerning and trusting can actually be a very difficult thing, because it's very easy to just make assumptions most of your life and assume, this person is sucky and they don't know what they're talking about, and this person is has nothing to offer you, and in a lot of ways we're constantly putting people into boxes because it's efficacious for us, because spending all this time to get to know a specific person can be very unconstructive, I guess. It can be very can result in a loss of time, it can result in a loss of energy, it can result in a loss of confidence. And overall, human relationships are such a complicated endeavor to really, break down into logical components that just thinking about why we do things, why does anyone care about what people think about them? Why does anyone bully anyone? Why do people get traumatized where they can't get over something that happened to them? And I guess as a species, we've kind of embraced this scientific way of thinking, where we think like, everything that we do, every mode of thought we have is an expression of free will. And maybe it would actually be more constructive if we could acknowledge that you as yourself are flawed, and work from there. Like, don't try to present as perfect, because it's almost as if we are supposed to present ourselves as the paragon of our own way of thinking. Like, if you have this belief about what you should do with your life, then you should follow that to the highest degree, and you should always believe in what you're doing, etc., etc. Maybe it's more valuable to just be able to say, I as an individual am someone who is going to make mistakes, am someone who is not maybe even afraid of being seen as having made a mistake in some way, and work from there. I guess I could say I'm projecting a little bit, I feel like I kind of have to present this perfected version of myself on YouTube. And that's fine. I mean, I'm not complaining about this. It's a medium. It's entertainment in a way. It's supposed to follow some kind of a process of refinement. So I'm not complaining about that specifically, but at a human level, it's discomforting to have to feel this way all the time, that every conversation has to be like an extremely perfect, well structured thing. And like when you get into just regular day-to-day conversations with people, and you feel like you have to prove something or you have to figure something out, maybe it's better to say, I'm talking to you, another person, because I want to explore my ideas, not because I want to be right, not because I want to figure anything out, but because I want to explore ideas and I want to get to know you. Like, isn't that kind of discomforting to like say to a person, like, I want to get to know you? Like, I mean, yeah, we assume that, right? But actually saying it to a person is weird. Especially like if you pretty much just met. And personally, in a lot of my relationships I've had, friendships mostly, I've pretty much felt like a quick connection with people, and then I would just maintain that, right? And it would be weird of me to then say to them, even though I've had this experience before where I've made this connection and it makes sense to me to pursue the relationship at that point. It's weird to say to that person directly, like, I want to get to know you specifically, instead of just having the conversation where you actually get to know them. I mean, I guess that's a matter of efficiency somewhat, like why even bothering with this? But I guess to me personally, it would be nice to be able to say something like that to someone, because I feel like it feels good to me to make the other person feel like they're doing well in the conversation, or they're engaging my attention, and so forth. I guess my broader point, outside of the fact that I felt limited in a lot of my relationships, is people aren't these intrinsically perfect beings. People aren't, most of us are not really capable of getting past our trauma, and that's okay. I mean, it's all just a matter of learning to live with who you are. It's a matter of not being afraid to, go on with your life and your way of looking at the world, interacting with people, and understanding that at some level, as much as we like to assume we're kind of like in this moment, all put together, all right and everything, maybe it's better to be able to admit and be open to people, like, it's okay to not be an amazing person all the time. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be wrong, instead of having like this constant confrontational mindset where, if you're talking about something serious or whatever, politics, whatever it is, maybe we shouldn't be always trying to like scapegoat the person if they make a mistake. And people have kind of actually located this phenomena and tried to make a more concrete sense of it when they say, for instance, they don't like debate bro culture. They don't like this gotcha kind of calculus in your head when you're having these debates with people where, if the other person makes a mistake, oh, you won. Yeah, I guess if I could isolate this to a particular cultural phenomena, I would pin it down on something like, why do we always judge the characteristics of a person who is supposed to fulfill like a particular role, like a politician, right? Like, say if they say something questionable or they do something that's morally gray or whatever, why do we then take that and apply it to our own like political narrative about them? Because it doesn't really matter if a particular person is like, absolutely morally deprived or whatever, if they're at the same time actually doing the job that they're supposed to in politics. Which is, it's a hard thing to concede, because obviously we want people who represent our ideology to do so in a way that looks good on the surface. because that's the level that most people are thinking at is if somebody does something bad, they must have something wrong with the way that they think or the way that they approach the world, which means that the ideas that they hold are wrong somehow. I don't think that really translates very well personally. I can see how other people would kind of make that assumption, but it seems kind of stupid to me, because then you're making the politician into more of a celebrity than a person who's meant to fulfill a role. And to me, a politician is just someone who's supposed to fulfill a role. But I guess at another level, there's this social dynamic going on where you're trying to make sense of the ideas, right? And so that person has to also present their ideas in a way that is like sensible to other people who are trying to like make sense of whatever the narrative is, whatever the question is. So yeah, on some level, it makes sense for people who have a vested interest in a certain political goal to have people representing their politics who present well, who seem cool and personable, etc. But again, I think this creates in like the people who are trying to make sense of politics from a more detached standpoint, I think it actually confuses them more than anything, because they're now immersed in this narrative where you're supposed to have all these feelings about this particular person. If I bring Kanye West up, I say something positive or negative about him, suddenly that's an endorsement of like everything he does. Like people, I feel, get pulled into this in a way. And it's related to like this notion we have with stuff like cancel culture. Like if a person like it's not enough anymore to just have the right opinions, or with like say J.K. Rowling or something, it's not enough to just write a good book. You now have to be a good person at the same time. It's kind of it confuses me at a very visceral level. And maybe other people don't have that. Maybe they just see the way that we already make sense of things with this relation between the personal and the business aspect of a person, celebrity, whatever, and maybe this makes perfect sense to them, but to me, it just doesn't. And I feel like maybe I could make sense of this in the way that when I'm talking to someone and I'm trying to ascertain who they are and what their values are, I might try to like take the way that they think about themselves and apply it to some kind of a political narrative or whatever, or an intellectual, spiritual kind of idea. Because, apart from this kind of segregative aspect between intellectualism and personal self-actualization, there is some kind of a gray area there that is maybe frightening to most people, which is learning to question the way that you act towards other people and your own values on the basis of philosophical principles. So for some people, if they could like rationally deduce like a perfect moral system, you would have to then like hold them to that, right? And I guess since we're not perfect and we all the time do things that we know are amoral, it's hard to maintain that framing of being someone who understands like a total holistic moral philosophy, but also being a flawed person who breaks that philosophy. So, yeah, the deeper point is when we're constructing this philosophy of ourselves and we're trying to understand the world as well as ourselves, maybe we're making some kind of a logical leap that if we believe something and we know it to be true, we can then ourselves enact that. But maybe politics isn't even really about trying to come up with the perfect idea, the perfect narrative. Maybe it's all about just getting a little, like an inch closer every day to what we could learn to live with and accept. Because obviously a lot of people have a hard time living with and accepting the current reality. People are dissatisfied. People have a lot of economic complaints, a lot of social complaints, and to make sense of all of this and to also make sure that like everyone gets included in whatever the end product is, it's very complicated. Like it's got a level of nuance to it that maybe we don't even really understand yet with our political narrativizations and ideological movements, because ideology is not the real world. I mean, this is a little bit about like post-modernism, for instance. just because we have ideas in our head and we can conceive of them, those don't naturally always translate to the real world because we're limited by finite circumstances. We're limited by the things that we're actually physically capable of doing. You can have an amazing creative idea in your head, but if you can't make it concrete, like if it's an art project or whatever, then it's not valuable to anyone unless, they can themselves do it. But I guess philosophy, and like in theory, with our economic system, we want everyone to prosper. We want everyone who's alive to like live their best lives. But maybe that isn't really the way that society actually approaches reality. Maybe the way we approach reality is very different from that, actually. And even if we don't consciously admit it or become aware of that, that's kind of just always how it's going to be. And I guess that to me is unfortunate. Like, I would like to think that the human narrative we've constructed is something which is going to remain consistent, of treating everyone with total humanity and respecting individuals, respecting just being able to look through, what this person represents and see like who they are at their core. And at their core, they're a human just like you. And that should be, in my opinion, the way that we continue to, have this egalitarian narrative. But I guess a lot of people who probably would not want to admit this don't really believe that. They kind of believe that the world is just their oyster, and anyone who gets in the way of that is like ontologically wrong or something. And I think a lot of people do kind of view the world this way. They view it from the narrative of something to win, and this is kind of like the root of, I guess, capitalistic values, where for instance, there's like game shows, right? And you go on them and you do your best, you compete, you're rewarded with money. Well, why are you rewarded for money with money for winning this total like fictional game that we've just created for entertainment, where that money could be used towards helping people? Like, why are you creating these hurdles instead of just using the money in the way that makes the most sense? To me, it's very stupid. But some people, I guess, would kind of like that in a way. They would like to actually win the game rather than have the money be distributed properly, because they only think about the world through the lens of their own benefits. And I can see how someone can get kind of caught up in this idea, how someone would kind of fall prey to this kind of an ideology. It's a result of, say it again, post-modernism, which is this detachment from the way that things actually exist and a focus on like the way that we subjectively interpret the world. So an easy example of this would be like, let's say you could get $100 if you just, press a button that causes some random person who you'll never meet to die. And if you think about this question, a lot of people would be willing to press that button. They'd be willing to press that button quite often, thinking that it doesn't affect them. But I personally have this kind of a spiritual principle where I try to think about it in terms of what is the holistic human spirit going to benefit or transcend from this particular outcome. We're all part of this very holistic kind of or collective mind, right? And I view every single person apart from me as contributing in some way to the grand human project, where in theory we at some point get over all of our differences and settle into the world and accept that everyone, no matter where they're born or their religion, race, whatever, they should all be able to live their best life. But I guess even in something so simple as the idea of coexistence, there's people who would oppose that. There's people who are like fundamentalists, and they would like to destroy, to use very virulent language here, they would like to destroy the other religions because they believe, again, at this ontological level, that their own religion is justified in every way possible, and anything that inhibits that is evil in a basic sense. And the way that this actually applies to what I've been saying about the people who only have this self-centered view of the world is they don't see or can't rationalize in their head how other people actually would benefit them. So they've reduced the person to an object They reduce the person to, what are you going to do for me? And I guess if I was to kind of like break down my own ideological process here of how, in a way, I also do this, but in a more collectivized sense. Like, if we as humans can all progress, can all unify, etc., then I think the world will be a much better place, even just for me personally, if we all get along better. And I think that's the most idealized version in like a utilitarian sense to me. Other people might disagree with that. Other people might say it's better to prioritize within a limited frame, within like your family, your religion, even your racial group. For some people who, for some reason, care about that. Something I just don't understand, honestly, is why racism is a thing. I guess I'm kind of stupid. Like, why would you give a crap about if someone is a different color, whatever. Anyway, moving on. But yeah, some people will always think about this within a limited frame. They'll always think it's about the benefit of the people who already serve me in some way. I guess they're just very, you could say, myopic in that way. They're short-sighted. They don't see how, maybe they don't even believe that humanity will go on to live for another 100 years or so, and maybe they're just trying to make the best out of it where they can. But this is a self-defeating ideology, because if anything, that is what's going to cause the human race to deteriorate, is having that self-centered denial of everyone outside of your in-group, or even just, in an extreme case, just purely yourself, where someone who's evil would use this kind of a logical justification, like, oh, the world's going to end anyway, I should just do whatever I want without regard for consequence. I mean, I guess if the world was going to end, like, it's really not much you can do to control people, or I guess, a lot of people would lose control of their impulses because they wouldn't see a point in the continuation of the human narrative, which is, again, one of egalitarian values. And the way I look at it is actually, it's a kind of societal schizophrenia, in a way. And schizophrenia literally means a splitting of the mind. So some person can present in this way that is like very loving and caring, and they want to, encourage the growth of the world and everyone around them, and even a stranger to them has value, etc., but to themselves, and again, this can be stratified under multiple layers of like subconscious processes. They really only care about themselves, and I think this is something we haven't really integrated as even like a possibility of the way that the world works. That maybe apart from there being like specific people who are opportunistic and take advantage of the naivete of the collective values of egalitarianism, there might be kind of collectivized impulses to want to obfuscate things to the point where that group benefits. And this could be something like a country, right? It could be maybe if there's like two teams and they're like trying to win a debate or something, they could use a lot of deceit. They could use a lot of kind of twisted tactics to try and win over the judges. And maybe this is how American politics work on some level, is the way that tribalism has formed is resultant of a collectivized kind of psychopathy, where we're no longer trying to actually do the best possible thing, we're trying to win the game. Like, going back to the game show example, if someone can be rewarded $1 million versus liberating that $1 million for the good of humanity as a whole, there's a lot of people who are going to go for the option of just selfish participation of the system, which has been outlined for them. And none of what I'm trying to say here is like selfishness is totally wrong. I don't think it is. I think there's a certain level where you have to be somewhat selfish just to get by, and then from that point maybe you can use the things you've done and money you've made, blah blah blah, to hopefully make other people's lives better. I mean, in theory, that's how capitalism is supposed to work, is it just brings the people who do the most good to the top. One could debate a great deal about whether that actually happens. And I kind of feel this way about the liberal conservative mindset, we have with the approach to politics today, which is, it's weird to me. And I guess I've outlined a way in which it makes sense to those who participate in it, but one could be a right-wing liberal, one could be a left-wing conservative, but I guess because both sides have this kind of vested interest in winning the game, they want to stratify it so that the conflict can, so that they can push some kind of a narrative which moves the culture in that particular direction. There's a lot of conservatives, actually, who do things that seem to stem from a place of, like, this left-wing egalitarian value set, which is, whatever gets everyone the most benefit is the best policy. They do it from a different way of looking at it, I guess. They do it from the way of, benefiting an elite is what benefits society, because the elite will know what's best for society. This is, a very old mindset that's kind of entrenched in, monarchies and things like that. And you gotta realize, even though these ideas seem stupid to us right now, they were very appealing in the past. It wasn't really just a matter of the king necessarily had the authority. He was exuding that over the people because they didn't even really have much technology back then. It would be pretty simple for the people to rise up against him. And if you have a sword or whatever, you can't really defend yourself against more than a couple people at once. And I have to wonder about that. This divine right of kings thing seems so obviously wrong, but it went on for such a long time. And why did that happen? Why did people not collectivize and use their power to get the most out of society instead of letting this one person get the most benefit out of it? And I think the basic rationalization for that is people are afraid. They're afraid of speaking up. They're afraid of, fighting against the power structure that already exists. And in a way, that's the same struggle we have today. I think even if people could totally see through the narratives of today that enable what I believe is a toxic power structure, they wouldn't do everything in their power because they just want to survive. Even if they are a peasant, they don't want to be beheaded for speaking up too loudly. So, to bring this back to the way I started, I started talking about how people will sometimes reserve themselves more than they are consciously aware of. And I also talked about how ideology and the formation of it with moral systems can be limited by our own character, our own willingness to act on that ideology. So I guess to put these things together into what I'm saying now, I kind of feel like this is going to be a little bit of a leap, a little bit of an assumption, I guess. But I feel like the fact that I've been limited in my own interactions with people kind of stems from this fear of not wanting to go too deep. Because, you don't want to upset the king, you don't want to upset the current power structures. When you start to really make sense of things and the way in which our personal lives are reflections of the world, people will actually start to be afraid to talk about this stuff. Something as simple as the paranoia of talking about conspiracy theories. And this is a very basic way of framing it, but that paranoia of being afraid that the government is gonna take you away or something if you speak up. And there are actually a lot of people who kind of think this way, whether they really admit that or not. So people, they place limits on the extent to which they will actually go down those rabbit holes of thought. And also they'll feel maybe they themselves are flawed. So if you come up with a perfect analysis of the way a person structures their behavior around their beliefs, maybe disambiguating that makes the other person feel exposed in a way that they don't want to address. So I guess it's somewhat difficult to me for this, as someone who is really honestly trying at a deep level to make sense of everything and disambiguate the world at a level where we can challenge current power structures. And it's a complicated endeavor, obviously. There's a lot more to it than even I can really conceive of at any moment. It's beyond any one individual's comprehension, the way the world truly works. This isn't meant to be some kind of a doomer thing. It's more we aren't really prepared, I guess, to confront everything. So maybe there's a necessary ignorance here because if there are truly a lot of psychopaths in the world, and our mission as a people is to prevent people who are this intrinsically selfish from taking advantage of us, then you have to have a level of self-preservation there. There's a bit of a paradox with self-preservation. Is if you want to help other people, sometimes you have to let certain people fall through the cracks, because to help society, you have to actually not focus on other individuals. You have to focus on the society as a whole, the world. The body of people beyond just those who you can relate to personally. I mean, if you could just help the people you knew in the world and not society as a whole, most people would do that, because they have this empathic connection they develop through just knowing a person physically, and being able to interact with them and so forth. That's how empathy works with most people, and I don't think maybe we've even reached this stage in the evolution of our psyche yet, where we can even conceive of the importance of the society of the world as a whole. Which is going to sound strange to a lot of people who on the internet are trying to maybe posture that they really do care about society as a whole, but I don't think most people actually do. I think a fairly small amount of people actually care about society as a whole, as a global civilization. And this is kind of this is how a lot of my conversations go, I feel, is I get to this level where maybe people don't want to have that level of thinking. Maybe it's easier for most people to assume that, everyone really is all in it together. But in my mind, this is the most important thing to be able to talk about, is overcoming our fear of being able to actually implement a world where we have a true systemic view and philosophy and praxis, where we are doing the best thing that we possibly can for society. And I don't really want to imagine a world where we settle for less than that, because I think it would be very grisly. I think it would be possibly the worst outcome that could ever result from this human experiment of collectivizing, of having a mind that is not just of your own interest, but of the interests of the continuation of the human species as a whole. But I'm not a doomer. I don't think the psychopaths will win that war at all. I think the human spirits and the current values we hold are going to eventually prevail. I don't have any logical justification for that, but I believe it. And by the way, this is why postmodernism is not an ideology. It's actually a condition. It's a result of not having the fundamental understanding of what the collective civilization means to us yet. We're still in a tribalist mindset where we're not necessarily inherently selfish, but we are self-interested to our own environment, and not to abstract notions of the other in the sense of people who are distant from us. This isn't really coming from having educated myself on a lot of postmodernist thinkers or whatever. It's just observing the world how it is has kind of informed me as to what our underlying processes are, underlying thoughts. So what's kind of happened basically that has led to this is we've just been kind of given everything most of our lives. At least those of us who are lucky enough to be born into fortunate circumstances. So as a result of being unable to empathize with that which we can't exactly perceive or fathom, we make a subconscious kind of logical leap that is not in alignment with the naturalistic process of the world. It's postmodernist thought, in this sense, is a lack of connection to the whole of humanity as it functions for you as a person who benefits from whatever the system is. So imagine if you were born in literally a bubble, and all of your needs, and you lived the most perfect possible life imaginable in that circumstance, and you didn't know what was providing you nourishment or entertainment or anything. You just kind of lived in that bubble and lived happily. And then let's say one day, after having existed for several dozen years or whatever, someone who is actually doing all the work to keep you alive and happy comes into the bubble and starts telling you, everything that they've been doing for you. And, you try to make this empathic connection there. But maybe as a result of simply being used to the way life has been given to you, you don't fully conceive of the importance of that. So it's a condition in this sense, in that you could seek to resolve it through certain means, immersion, through developing empathy through various ways. You could do like trust exercises or something. And so there's kind of a socialization process through which you have to develop empathy, almost like a muscle, but not exactly. It's more like building a structure, or I guess a building in a way, because once you construct it, I think it maintains itself basically. Like if you have that basic fundamental knowledge of the importance of empathy, I don't think you necessarily lose that. But if you never build it in the first place, then I guess you have that condition of post-modernist apathy, where you only care about the specific people that are introduced to you. But humans were still animals, basically. It's important to keep that in mind. So even if we're in this sense beholden to the limits of post-modernist formation of our thoughts, it's important to keep in mind that we can overcome this through, I would say, concrete means. It's not just purely ideological. Much as we'd probably like to think that it's purely ideological, it's actually, in my opinion, as someone who pays a great deal of attention to the way the collective thinks, it's also equally crucial to actually develop certain real-world things that would foster this kind of global empathy, which is what we actually need to complete the project of society. And though on one hand, a lot of things are just a logical consequence of doing what makes the most sense in the moment, on the other hand, a lot of our actions are informed by, as I've been saying throughout this video, things which we're not totally conscious of. So, like, if you lived in this bubble, you would probably, if these people told you, you should care about us too, blah, 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 you probably wouldn't really be able to, being the product of your environment, totally do that, like almost at a physical level, So the consequence of this is that it seeps into our politics as well, because, human existence is a series of interpersonal relationships, and this is going to reflect even on those, if you don't have a fully formed sense of empathy. And then where it comes to politics, you're going to have a lot of people who are nationalists because, and you got to think, like, why does nationalism exist? Is it because these people think that their country is so amazing that it should own every other country or something? I don't think that's ideologically consistent with anything that you could justify in reality. But still, a lot of people kind of, again, they become prey to their own ideology, ultimately, because, humanity will fall if we don't overcome nationalism, in my opinion, which, again, if you're just looking at it from a selfish perspective, to you, that's probably fine. But the problem with nationalism is, what I'm trying to illustrate here is it's created by our apathy towards people who exist outside of what we know and understand. Like xenophobia, basically. Fear of something which is different from yourself. But again, to me, this is uninformed, because when you consider the amount of things that come into your life that are positive because of people who are different from you, you have to realize it would be very, very foolish to assume that you yourself are, like, more important to them than them in some way. Anyway, sorry I'm recording these videos just in, like, weird ways, like, randomly in my bed. But sometimes I just kind of feel like talking, and this is what happens as a result of that. And I don't script these or anything. I just kind of some days feel like venting or whatever, and then I try to, apply it intellectually. So I hope this was somewhat interesting.